All right, let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about building a culture of healthy disagreement and how to think outside the box, how to encourage teams to seek the diversity of different perspectives to yield better outcomes. So let's go through the agenda here real quick. We're going to spend a little time talking about the box and why it's limiting. We're going to talk about disagreements. Maybe some of you or some of your team find disagreement or conflict not fun or healthy. Maybe give you some tools on how to get people who do not like confrontation or do not like arguing or do not like agreement some buy-in into these type of processes. We're going to talk about how to use some of these tools to build consensus and alignment around technical outcomes, product outcomes, and even at the executive level, how to align on strategy outcomes. We'll have some advanced topics, and then hopefully we'll wrap up in maybe about 10 or 15 minutes. All right, so let's get into the box. The box is a very narrow way of thinking. There's just too few perspectives to examine the possibilities of the world around us. So let's think back to maybe some of our past experiences where we're working with a team. We've all heard the phrase, if all you have is a hammer, the world looks like a nail, or all the problems look like a nail. It's putting more tools in the toolbox so that you gain different perspectives on the world that increases the possibilities of us seeing not only the world around us, but what we can do to improve the outcomes in the world around us. So if you find that your engineers or your product folks have a limited set of capabilities or a limited set of tools, they're likely constrained by their own imagination. They're likely constrained about their own curiosity of different perspectives. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is how to basically bring down the barriers of that box. So really starts off with welcoming new perspectives, right? Being in a position where you want to welcome new perspectives. If you welcome new perspectives, that box is going to get too full, and those sides are just going to bust out, and then you're going to be living in the world in full pursuit of the world rather than in the tiny box the team might have placed themselves in. But, we're actually up against some psychology that works in the human mind. So people tend to think in black and white. It's day or it's night. I'm hungry or I'm full. I'm tired or I have energy. I am thirsty or I am not thirsty. It's just a very bicameral mind. It's a very black and white. We think very binary and gets us into trouble a lot. It's really in pursuit of that third option, that fourth option, that fifth option, that sixth option, that you truly start getting towards the great ideas. I would actually say oftentimes the first one or two ideas you have probably aren't the best ideas, or at least if you're looking for something innovative, it's not going to be contained in that set of the first two ideas you have. You're going to have to expand beyond that. A good example of is like if you're heading to work and you go outside and your car's broken down, you might come up with one or two different options for that. I'm going to call in sick today because I had in-person meetings and I just can't make it. Or I'm going to work from home and I'm going to try to dial in. But if you give yourself a moment to actually push yourself to see different ideas you can do in that situation, you're going to come up with a lot more just by taking a moment to push. I could take the bus to work. My friend, my neighbor Fred works nearby my office building. Maybe he can drop me off at work and take me home. That bicycle that I bought 3 years ago that's hanging up in my garage, I can actually learn the bike route today and take that to work. We now have Ubers. I'll just take an Uber to work. I know that sucks. It's a bit of an expense, but these in-person meetings are important. So you'll find yourself, if you actually build that self-awareness of yourself, is that whenever you encounter a problem that you don't think deeply about, you're going to come up with one or two options and your mind's going to just be satisfied. The trick here, I think, is to get you, your team, your employees to not be satisfied with those first one or two options, and that will get them outside the box. Another issue that I think prevents people from wanting to think outside the box is new perspectives can clash with existing perspectives. You know this when you hire someone new and they might come in with these big ideas, and the rest of the team will almost immediately kind of like try to tamp that down, get them to be part of the pack, get them to think like themselves, rather than celebrate those new perspectives. That might have been something you'd encountered before. I think really healthy teams you might manage or your existing team probably actually welcomes those new perspectives nowadays, but I can tell you it's at least in my experience, a very human thing. If you're not being and pushing your team to be self-aware of some of these things, you can find that the natural human condition is to get people to acclimate or get people to adopt the local cultures versus letting those new cultures come in and basically inoculate themselves in and become a part of that and have that existing organization transform itself with those new perspectives as those new hires come in. Since we're kind of talking about some of the anti-patterns or negative use cases, I wanted to get into some examples of limited perspectives and how they can lead to bad outcomes. One, I was just listening to NPR yesterday on the radio, and they were talking about kind of a famous Abercrombie and Fitch, which was a very, very big clothing retailer, fashion retailer, that was pretty big, probably 10, 15 years ago. And they had a shirt that said, and this is going to sound terrible, but this is what the shirt said. It said, "Two Wongs don't make a white." And it was two Asian people, slanted eyes, a bowl of rice. And it was just very racist. And the shirt flew off the shelves. Their existing kind of core demographic thought it was funny, and it took a lot of pressure, I think, from outside cultures to say how wrong that actually was. And they finally discontinued the shirt. They sent out an apology, and we haven't seen that type of racist shirt from Abercrombie and Fitch in some time. But why wasn't that perspective in the room? Why wasn't there an Asian perspective, or at least someone who was an ally to Asian cultures that stood up and said, no, that's not right? It's because that company probably had a very well-defined box of what they considered acceptable, and they didn't welcome in those new perspectives, and they had to learn the hard way. Another one is Amazon. Had these badges for a long time. They were kind of little flimsy badges like you would see from a lot of security companies. It usually says HID on it. I think that's the name of the security company that did that. And Amazon decided at some point they needed fancier badges. And they put this crack team together. I think it was about 12 people. And there's material scientists. And they built all these prototypes. And they came up with this really cool badge. It was longer. It was thicker. It was more substantive. It was stylish, right? All the pictures on it were black and white. Where formerly the pictures were color, the pictures were black and white. And they rolled this out pretty widely across all of Amazon with a lot of fanfare until they realized that in some Chinese culture, a black and white photo is a picture of death. It's a picture, that's how you capture pictures of people that have died. And if you are part of this Chinese culture and Amazon comes up and hands you a badge with your picture on it and it's in black and white, that resonates very differently in that culture than it would maybe in a culture that appreciated how stylish that badge was. So why wasn't this caught? Why wasn't this found in the process? Is because that team probably had a very limited amount of perspectives. They didn't seek those additional perspectives to see, is this actually something that would be welcomed by Amazon's 1.5 or 1.8 million people. Is there anything wrong with this? Do we have a blind spot to why this might not be welcomed by everybody? Another Amazon learning that I had is about social cohesion. Social cohesion is kind of the thought that people and groups want to arrive at agreement, and sometimes even if it's the wrong answer, as long as they're in agreement, they feel okay about things. And Bezos used to have an example where he was in an auditorium, so he used the auditorium as an example. And he said, if I asked the three of you right there to figure out how tall the ceiling is, the conversation might go like this. Well, I think that ceiling is 12 feet tall, says one person. Next person says, no, I think that's 16 feet tall. And then maybe the third person will say, well, let's just call it 14 feet tall. And y'all might be happy. Like you arrived, you explored the range a little bit, you arrived at something you consider a compromise. And off you go, you feel great about the situation. The ceiling is 14 feet tall. And he said a true Amazonian would basically get a chair, stack some chairs on top of each other, or get a ladder and get a measuring tape and then measure how tall the ceiling is in the first place. You can arrive at social cohesion that way too. It's a little harder because especially if people have already cohesively gotten around the idea it was 14 feet for you to come in and basically offer an alternative reality, which is the tape measure, that might not go over well. So it's avoiding that social cohesion in the first place and seeking the perspectives and seeking the data was kind of the material lesson from that. So social cohesion can also keep us in the box. And you also see this sometimes with engineers fighting over solutions. If you're a CTO or an engineer, you might know the famous fights over, tabs versus spaces, or, how to write functions and, keep white space around functions, the various different linting styles, this language versus that language, this backend infrastructure versus that backend infrastructure, where you get kind of, I don't want to use the word religious, you get very grounded in a certain comfort area where that then just becomes the way that you think. And rather than reaching out and saying, hey, why are you interested in this other solution? People tend to retreat and encamp rather than seeking those different perspectives. So these are all examples of the box that we find ourselves in, with limited perspectives, limited data, limited curiosity, limited welcoming of new ideas. So I think as a CTO, VP of engineering, or even as an engineer, you can help change culture in which disagreement actually can become a celebrated part of your culture. But disagreements aren't fun or healthy for a lot of people. There are distinct personality types, which are large swaths of the population that do not enjoy conflict. And what you're saying when you want to build a culture of disagreement is you're basically saying to them, we want to build a culture of conflict, and that is not going to resonate well. So I found moving beyond the words disagree or disagree and commit, those are both kind of harsh words in the vocabulary, and instead focus on diverge, right? Diverge some ideas onto the table, put different ideas on the table, seek those new perspectives, explore some new perspectives, or even inclusive of diverse perspectives to kind of go to the DEI culture. Being inclusive of those diverse perspectives can actually help kind of take down that box, but also bring along the people that aren't as confrontational as you might be. So if we use those different words, does that change how we feel about disagreement? Probably does. So what I've been using is diverge and converge as ways to bring people into what was formerly the argument, now into a process where we welcome different perspectives. With that, these different perspectives widen the realm of possibility. So if that box is this big and we eradicate the sides, all the walls of that box, and now we can exist in the whole world, we have a whole new realm of possibilities that we get to go explore. That increases our possible outcomes, but much like that car example I used earlier, when we think of the third or the fourth or the fifth or the sixth idea, that sixth idea might actually be better than the two ideas that were found in that box. So you might actually end up, and you likely will end up executing towards a better outcome, the more you can widen the diversity of perspectives that you have. So where Amazon says disagree and commit, and I think because those are such narrow terms, we don't get as much value out of that in the Amazon context as you might, as if you said, we welcome a divergent phase of a conversation, and then we welcome a convergent phase of a conversation. We'll get into that in practical matters here, tactical matters here very soon. But we also can make divergence fun for a lot of people. Where debate or disagreement is not fun for a lot of people, divergence can be fun. Brainstorming is an example where teams have fun. Doing alternative analysis can be something where people have fun with that. There's a lot of different tools that you can think about in your local environment where you can encourage those divergent ideas to come out. But let's just start with brainstorming and alternative analysis, because those are the two most common ones. I'd love to hear from you in the comments in this video if you actually know other ideas how to make divergence as a replacement for debate and disagree to be a fun exercise. And then when we celebrate new ideas or different perspectives, if we think about the concept that there are no bad ideas, and I think people don't understand that, by the way, I want to kind of dwell on that for a minute. I've always felt, and I've seen this happen time and time again, hundreds of times in brainstorming sessions, where someone has otherwise what would be a bad idea, just not anything that a team would pursue. Maybe sounds ridiculous on its face, but that actually jogs someone else's idea out of their head, where that bad idea then becomes a good idea with someone else's help, and then that good idea becomes a great idea with the team's help. So if that good idea would never have turned into a great idea if that good idea wasn't identified, and that good idea might not have ever been put on the table if that bad idea wasn't put on the table. Are there really any bad ideas? I would say no. I would say that it's just an idea that's in an early state that has a chance to evolve to a later state that actually does have greatness in it. So there are no bad ideas. And when you encourage your team and then you celebrate new ideas through that divergence phase or the brainstorming alternative analysis phase, you're going to find people are willing to put more and more ideas on the table, which have a chance to lead to those great ideas. These are examples of how we make divergence psychologically safe. No one's going to put a bad idea on the table or an early state idea on the table if they feel their idea is going to be made fun of. So you as a leader, and even all the engineers or all the product managers or the team that you're working with, you want everyone to feel psychologically safe while they're going through that stage of divergence or debate or disagreement, however you want to put it. I also think that encouraging vocally self-critical, especially as the leader, is something that helps establish that safety zone. So if you can encourage if you can be vocally self-critical as a leader, if you can have other people see that you were able to do that safely, they might feel okay to be vocally self-critical. Like, I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but I was thinking about this. This is probably not appropriate for this particular situation, but maybe someone has a way to kind of embrace and extend this idea into something else. You can be vocally self-critical as a way to basically build an environment of psychological safety. The other thing that I find where when you're in a room and people are brainstorming, there might be personal kind of effects or personal kind of personality traits that get in the way of that. I find that a super great way to get great new ideas on the table or to see blind spots, which is just another form of a different perspective, is to document an idea. Get a offline review of that idea where there's comments enabled, like in Google Docs, and actually ask people to give those divergent perspectives to that document, which makes it feel less personal. Again, just another way to kind of eke out a little bit more psychological safety, and also as a method to gather new perspectives. So the kind of the Amazon style document review, leave comments, respond to comments, can help evolve a culture in which those perspectives are gathered and then potentially acted on to evolve an idea from a good idea into a great idea. So this whole slide was basically hopefully getting people that are opposed to confrontation or opposed to debate. And again, it's just a different way of thinking. It's my new perspective for you potentially, that there are ways to encourage more ideas without feeling psychologically unsafe. All right, let's talk about some practical ways that we can actually employ this diverge and converge idea or think outside the box. So just first our approach, let's say we go through a diverge stage. Let's say there's a bunch of ideas on the table. And maybe the first thing you're going to think about is there's 8 people on my team or 80 people on my team. How do I get them to settle on the best idea among all these? Everyone's going to have a different subjective view to what the best idea is. I just got myself into more trouble by putting more ideas on the table than I had if I put too few ideas on the table. So the way I do this is I kind of build some layers of abstraction. And there's going to be 3 layers of abstraction I'm going to go through. The first one is goal identification, problem statement, or opportunity statement. Anytime a team engages, they're probably going to be going after one of these things. What's the goal that we're going after? Is it increasing the conversion rate from 1.1 to 2%, which we've learned is industry standard for a e-commerce funnel? Or is the problem statement, our latency, is it 600 milliseconds? We've been asked to get this to 400 milliseconds. That could be a problem statement. Opportunity statement could be, at Twitch, we thought about this. We had monetization for our top 30,000 streamers. We called them partners. And the opportunity was to build a middle class of streamers that also had access to our monetization tools that we eventually ended up calling affiliates. But that was an opportunity. The opportunity statement in that was, how do we extend our monetization tools to a middle class of streamers that we can grow into our higher class streamers, which we called our partners. So just starting and getting very clear with the team before you even talk about solutions, even before you talk about the approach, even before you talk about any of that stuff, is just spend a half an hour with your team and talk about the goal. Agree on exactly what that goal is, and then stop. Just stop right there. Everyone walks out, they feel great, they're aligned to what the goal, the problem, or the opportunity is. Then, rather than go directly into building solutions to that goal, or methods into which way to manifest that goal, I build another layer of abstraction called success criteria. And let's go back to the example of the conversion ratio. So, conversion ratio of my company's e-commerce funnel is 1.1%. We have recognized the industry standard for this type of e-commerce platform is 2%. That's the goal. That's the problem that we're trying to solve. The success criteria would be something like we have metrics in place where we can measure. Same as that industry standard, because maybe that 1.1% that we have is actually not measured the same way as the people that are measuring the 2%. So a success criteria could be we're measuring in parity to how the people who are measuring the 2% industry standard are. It could be that we don't deteriorate the customer experience, that we do not lose trust with any of our customers, that we are bold enough to consider changing our entire e-commerce funnel as it is. Again, we're not building solutions, we're building success criteria where if we achieve the success criteria, we will have then achieved that goal without discussing the solution. We do not want to bake the solution into the success criteria. It's just how we know an idea is good enough. If it can meet the success criteria, we know we met our goal. So that's stage 2. And I usually have another half-hour meeting. Hour meeting, sometimes it's a really big strategy. We can have a 2-hour meeting about this. But we just build success criteria that's abstracted and agnostic to the solution that we know that will help us identify that did we meet the problem statement? Did we solve that problem? Did we realize that opportunity? Do we know how we measure our goal actually being reached? Then we actually start solution building. So there's two steps for that. Again, write the problem statement down, build the success criteria, and then we go brainstorm because we all know what we're talking about. Fun thing about this is when people are actually adding their ideas, again, kind of back to that, bad idea becomes a good idea becomes a great idea. Sometimes you'll have 2 great ideas or 2 good ideas. And I heard this somewhere on some podcast once that 2 ideas can have an idea baby. Maybe not be appropriate, but I actually kind of funny and interesting is that you can merge 2 good ideas into a great idea, an idea baby. It's kind of fun to talk about. All right, so let's get super focused here. All right, so we know we need to focus on the goals, the problems, opportunity at the top of the document. This should be easy for people to agree. You cannot move past the point to everybody working on this exercise is in agreement with the goals, problems, or opportunities. Just can't even move into solutions if we can't agree on what we're actually after. And this is funny because this is what most people miss is they jump right into the solution and they're not even talking about the same problem. They're not even talking about the same opportunity. So I have this in the second bullet point. What is a tree? I'm going to use this a lot as an example. So if I ask you to think of a tree, and I think of a tree, and we're like, cool, we're both thinking about trees. That's awesome. We're aligned. Well, what if you just thought of like a massive maple tree and I thought of a bonsai tree? Are we really talking about the same thing? Happens all the time with like problem and opportunity statements is that we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're really not. So as verbose as you can be in the problem and opportunity and goal kind of statements, take that, like extend that as far as you think you want to go and go a little further just to disambiguate any misunderstanding that might be happening. Because by the time you get to solutions, if you don't agree on the problem statement, you're going to end up fighting a lot more than otherwise you would because you're not really fighting about the solution, you're actually fighting about the misunderstanding of the problem. Cool. So we talked about the success criteria. There probably should be for any one problem statement, there should be 5, 6, maybe success criteria, again, abstracted from the solution. And then you want to build at least 3 approaches into your document as alternative analysis. What I mean by this is that we talked about the brainstorming. We're going to welcome as many ideas on the table. We want to get away from the binary mind. So if we want to get away from binary, you should have at least 3 approaches. Now, in a startup environment, doing 15 alternative analyses might not be appropriate or stage appropriate for that. At Amazon, it is. Amazon will look at a ton of different, approaches to solving a problem and meeting our success criteria as we need to be. But at a smaller company, probably not. But 1 or 2 is not enough. at least 3 approaches is important. As we gather these ideas, the person who's leading this might start understanding that we can make a recommendation to show why one of these ideas meets the success criteria better than others. And we should establish one person to go do that, to at least make a recommendation as a straw man to go back to the greater team to see if they actually believe that that recommendation is correct. And that's when you get the wide review of the technical solution or the design or the strategy, and be open to all feedback, because the writer of this document, who's gathered all these perspectives, made a recommendation, back tested it to the success criteria that we know will actually help us meet that goal or solve that problem, they might have a ton of blind spots. And so the person who's writing that document, who's leading this effort, needs to be in a position where they listen to feedback, even if it does not materially change the outcome. I've found that just by listening to someone who has an alternative point of view, even if I don't materially come to the same conclusion, can actually help that person align to my final decision because they were listened to and they were heard out. Especially if I have a response that acknowledges the veracity or the quality of their feedback. If I walk them through why I came up with a different conclusion than they did, they might actually be on board with the eventual recommendation, and then we can move forward together as a team. So don't downplay the listening to the other perspectives. Even after you gathered the perspectives and made your recommendation and tried to move forward, it's still even listening at that final recommendation stage to then get someone to want to align to the final feedback that you're looking at. All right, so that's the basics. Problem definition, success criteria, gathering up a bunch of ideas, back testing against the success criteria, making a recommendation as a decision maker, going back to your team to see if you actually arrived at the right conclusion, being open to different perspectives, walking through those conversations. At that point, you will have an aligned team. You'll be able to move forward, and you can go into the execution phase and start solving the problems or seeking the opportunities that you're looking to seek without having the box constrain you. Cool. A couple advanced topics now that we're past that, and I'm welcome to talk to any of you or answer anything in the comments as far as my methodology for diverge, converge, and building that set of wide perspectives. But I did want to get into these advanced topics that are fun. Co-escalation. So this happened a few times at Twitch, and this is actually where I learned this methodology, where there was a team where their problem or their goals were in, I would say, direct conflict with another team's goals or organization. I actually remember this was happening even at Twitch Prime, where we had a team that was in charge of acquisition, and then we had a team that was in charge of retention. And the acquisition team would basically go get people to sign up for Twitch Prime for very low value accounts, meaning people that would come in and get whatever free skin or whatever downloadable content that was promised to them for signing up for Twitch Prime, and then they would just cancel their account. But their numbers were great because they were doing such a good job enticing people to make it across that barrier to sign up for Twitch Prime. And then there was this retention team, and their job was to keep people and not have them churn out of Twitch Prime as a subscription product. And you can imagine if the retention team is just killing it and all these low value offers that people just do not want to stick around for their entire subscription, it made the retention team's numbers incredibly difficult and incredibly hard. They were failing as a team, but it wasn't for any fault of their own. The acquisition team was nailing it, but it wasn't nailing it in ways that were in the Venn diagram of success, inclusive of the retention team. So there was a co-escalation document written. And what that is you basically take two teams that are in disagreement and you have them agree what the problem is. The problem that they both agreed on is that one team was being incentivized for signups, another team was being incentivized for retention, and they were not being successful together. And they were very easy. That was the problem. They were able to write down that problem statement and agree on it. What's interesting about co-escalation rather than an escalation document is the Twitch Prime retention team had to write from the perspective of the acquisition team what was wrong and what their solution would be. And then the acquisition team had to write it from the perspective of the retention team. What was really interesting about the co-escalation practice at Twitch is just the writing of that document tended to solve the problem because it forced both parties to see from the other person's perspective what they thought the problem was and what they thought the solution would be, and what the recommendation to, let's say, the VP who would otherwise be coming to be asked and made a decision. Out of the probably 15 co-escalation documents I was able to read at Twitch, none of them actually were ever submitted to the VP to make a decision. It was just the act of seeing from the other person's perspective. And in the case of the Twitch Prime example, the two leaders of these organizations decided to reorg into a new organization which was mainly retention based, because that was the long-term value for Amazon, where acquisition was an input into retention, but the input metrics into retention were basically completely re-engineered that got that team away from using those low-value actions. They still were very successful. They were just successful under different criteria. So co-escalation is a very cool thing. So if you see two engineers disagreeing about something and they just can't move past each other, to teams that are disagreeing, to organizations that are disagreeing, try the co-escalation methodology where they have to consider and they write each other's opposing point of views and see if it actually ever turns into an escalation. In my case, it never did. Actually, I heard there was one that even after co-escalation made it to a VP, but I don't know the details of that. Obviously, hiring as a leader is a very potent tool that we have. I'm a huge believer in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's because I believe science has shown that diversity and diverse teams with a lot of different perspectives build better products and they have better outcomes. So the advanced topic here is know your team, know what they're capable of, know their perspectives very well, and when you're hiring, seek different lived experiences, seek different social experiences. Back to the Amazon badges example, or the Abercrombie and Fitch example. Seek people that will complement and supplement your team and not be redundant to your team for their existing perspectives. That will just put more ideas on the table, and you can never lose sight of the fact that hiring is probably your best way, other than these methodologies, to get more perspectives on the table. This last one is very near and dear to my heart, which is build room for others to learn the hard way. After 4 years at Twitch, I found myself hearing repetitive ideas. And what I mean by that is we would hire a new leader and they would say, I think we need to do X. And I heard that idea before. I probably heard it 30 times before. And I'd been through 30 meetings before where we decided not to do that idea for very good reason. And so I basically would say, we've already tried that before, we're not going to try that again. And the new leader felt shut down. And they felt like, well, okay, but I wasn't there in that meeting. I didn't have a chance to give my voice to that. I didn't have a chance to learn from that experience. And what I did by doing that is I essentially reinforced a box. I didn't give enough room to that new idea. And the thing is, if that person who had that idea about doing X was present 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they might have had a very good argument for why we should do it. But because I shut them down because we've already made that decision, wasn't inclusive to them and to their perspective. Now, let's say I felt that X was just a really bad idea. We've already learned the hard way ourselves, but this person hasn't had a chance to learn the hard way. I think giving space to someone who has that idea that you may have evaluated and looked at and decided not to do, or let's say rolled back a feature, if you give them a chance to lead it, well, there's going to be two outcomes. One is going to be maybe not surprising to you, which is they're going to learn what you learned, but they're going to be in receipt of that experience themselves versus you standing in their way to go learn that. The alternative is the one that's surprising to me, is that maybe the decision you made 2 years ago not to do X was the right decision at the time, but by doing X today, it actually could be the right decision. Which means that you standing in the way of this person actually might have prevented that person from doing something today that actually might have worked because your timeline was just 2 years too early in evaluating what that person was thinking. So I found myself a lot more open when it comes to ideas that I've had before, or ideas that my team has had before, to have a lot much more allowance for new members of the team to go try it for themselves. It doesn't mean I can't share my experience with them, but I can also be very encouraging to them to go try it themselves and see what happens. So again, a new way to potentially build a new perspective for yourself, a way to share perspective with somebody else, but a way not to shut down that person's perspective because you already know better. So just an interesting topic and something I learned a lot about, and I think something that a lot of early leaders struggle with is letting people learn for themselves. All right. So just in wrap up, the pursuit of diverse perspectives will power your team to outcomes firmly out of reach prior to you thinking inside the box. I think that should be pretty evident. If it's not, it should be something you're willing to experiment with. Hopefully in watching this talk, you have some tools to do that. Replace disagreement or disagree and commit, which are harsher words, and replace them with more inclusive or approachable terms like diversity of ideas. Let's brainstorm, alignment and conversion. What I've used is diverge and converge. I actually kind of use it a little too much in my last company. One of the senior leaders said we should make a drinking game out of every time Andrew says diverge and converge. It was kind of funny. But I do believe in it, and I do believe in practice. People have come to really believe in this methodology, and it works well for teams. And if this is all new to you, as I've always encouraged, is experiment, start small, and then have the courage to expand this deeper into your product and engineering culture if you find successes. All right, that's all for me today. Hope you enjoyed the talk. Have a great rest of your day.